Ah, yes. Well, I think the guests are all here, I hope. I know Dr. Oswald Thomas has just joined in. Of course, he's one of our regulars, social and political commentator. As well, I think Leroy George is also joining us, and he is a research writer out of Trinidad and Tobago. And also out of Trinidad and Tobago, we have Pearce Robinson. He is a developmental diplomat and strategic advisor with over 2 decades of experience shaping policy, strategy, and governance reform across the UK, Africa, Asia, Pacific, and the Caribbean. His work with the United Nations, World Economic Forum, G20, WCRC, and the Commonwealth Secretariat has positioned him at the forefront of international diplomacy and development. As chairman of Scarlet 41, he convenes governments, multinational agencies, and private sector leaders to advance trade, strengthen regional integration, and foster youth leadership. He has led missions in multiple countries, ensuring that small states and emerging regions have a credible voice in global affairs. Yeah, and so today we're going to be discussing some regional developments, particularly affecting Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela, and the wider Caribbean. Let's see, do we have Leroy George? Are you there? Okay, I'm not sure if he's there. But how about Pearce Robinson? Pearce Robinson, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
All right, and Leroy George, are you there?
Yes, I'm here also.
Excellent. And Dr. Oswald Thomas, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, usually with that long delay. All right, so these events that are occurring in our waters here in the Caribbean, it's quite troubling. Tell us, maybe I should start with Piers. How has relationships been between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela? Do you have a little history about the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela recently? Because we've never really heard of these kinds of conflicts, at least not in my memory, in the Caribbean. So has this thing been brewing for a while, or is it a completely new development?
No, interestingly, by the way, thank you for having me on your show, and on Pointe FM 99.1 FM, and to the folks listening public in Antigua and Barbuda. To your question, I think Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela have largely enjoyed pretty stable relationship with each other diplomatically. We've always had back and forth, particularly during the Petro-Caribe period, where, of course, it was felt by us in our foreign policy that Venezuela would have undercut us to provide the region with affordable petrol, which kind of undermined our bottom line. And then Mr. Manning and Hugo Chavez had a bit of a back and forth then. But notwithstanding all of that, relations have always been quite stable. Trinidad and Tobago has historically taken a very neutral approach in the Caribbean. And so the region is quite surprised, I would say, as to the way things have evolved in recent times.
All right. Okay. Very interesting. I didn't know about that bit of history there. Okay. So, Mr. George, how are the people in Trinidad and Tobago feeling about the recent buildup of military assets in the region? Can you give us an insight into that?
Well, I am from Tobago in particular, and in Tobago is where a lot of the tension is. But the reason for that being, there was a radar that was placed in the A&R Robinson Airport, or one international airport here in Tobago, and it was placed there without the consent or the knowledge of the people. And what made that particularly insulting is that, according to the 16th item on the 5th schedule of Act 40 of 1996 in the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution, airports fall under infrastructure in particular, where airports and seaports are concerned, fall under the Tobago House of Assembly, and we heard the Chief Secretary claiming that he knew nothing about it. So that causes a lot of tension also because that particular raider, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, she would have said on social media that one of the purposes of that radar is to detect what she calls sanction busters. So that could be interpreted as being to assist the United States when it comes to this blockade. And as a result of that, a lot of Tobagonians understand that this radar constitutes a legitimate missile target if anything was to happen between Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, or between the United States and Venezuela, since the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has broken with the norm, as Mr. Robinson would have accurately put it there, and sided with the United States over Venezuela. And so the last thing that I would say where that is concerned, besides all the vexations and frustrations, is the relationship, as Mr. Robinson put it, was very good up until now. Even so good that Trinidad and Tobago, which has one of the longest running petrochemical industries in the world, we are in the twilight of our petrochemical industry in the sense of we're running low on reserves. Our drug and gas deal has been struck between the last central government administration and Trinidad and Tobago, whereby we would have run some pipelines from the Venezuelan side of the marine territorial border to the Trinidad and Tobago side, and we would have started selling Venezuelan oil, well, gas, natural gas, and in so doing, we would have had a lifeline to our petrochemical industry. So this is a real shock to Trinidad and Tobago in general, and to Tobago in particular, being in that particular position with that radar and whatever other assets may be at the A&R Robinson Airport.
Oh, wow. Well, that is very interesting. How you're expressing it there, it sounds like the folks of Tobago could become a real target if any conflict should erupt. Mr. Robinson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, we got to really look, and just to add a little bit more context, because there has been like the background is that Trinidad, Tobago, and Venezuela, just purely by the mere fact of being so close to each other, right? Just 7 miles off of the coast of Venezuela. That's quite close, right?
I hear swimming distance. You can swim there?
Yes, of course. Right. Venezuela was one of the many countries, of course, to recognize Trinidad and Tobago after independence in 1962, right? And because of how close we are, our relations are built upon, a main sort of premise, right? That is maritime cooperation, trade and energy, fishing, and of course, migration management. So in the 1960s to the sort of early 2000s, that was a long period of stable relations with Venezuela, right? So that we can say that was a good 3 decades of stable relations. And of course, in 1999, you had the election of Hugo Chavez. He was elected, of course, on an anti-establishment platform, and that shifted Venezuela to what you call 21st century socialism, right? It was an openly anti-US, quote unquote, imperialist foreign policy where they wanted to nationalize a lot of the, resources of the country to bring the resources back home. They would have used oil diplomacy. I mentioned in the opening the Petro-Caribe to build their regional influence. And of course, that would have undercut us a bit, right? So that shift also impacted our relationship with Venezuela. But given our proximity, it was decided that it would make more sense for us to maintain diplomatic relations, continue that conversation on trade and energy dialogue. But of course, those tensions would have existed, right? But that kept the relationship sort of functional, right? And I think when it comes to, extending into the public mood and stuff, just to add a little bit into that, I think generally the feeling amongst the population, both in Trinidad and more so in Tobago, is that there's an unease, right? I don't think people have reached to the stage of panic yet, but people are looking at, how things are escalating, the narrative that is being spoken at home. They're looking at the fact that, uh, they were misled into believing that there weren't any assets and hardware and stuff in Tobago, only to learn later on that actually there are key assets in Tobago which are integral to the military build-up and campaign against Maduro, which has turned out to be regime change. So this sort of the developments in the security sphere have become very, very clear, visible to members of the public. Information has been arriving in kind of fragments, and this is rife, I think, for the uncertainty that is taking place on both islands. So that's what I would just sort of add a little bit of context there to the conversation.
All right. And Pearce, you've described yourself as an integrationist, I think, regional
Absolutely.
integrationist. What does that term mean to you, really?
This is a very good question. I see the Caribbean region as a block, and I think the best way for me to describe it is actually to understand what all of this means for you guys, Antigua and Barbuda, because an integrationist means that what happens elsewhere in our neighborhood, and I call the region our neighborhood, affects us. It doesn't just stay in one place, right? So, we might be having a little squabble, if you like, to be very flippant about it, between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, but it's not stopping there. You know why? Because it has a direct impact on the entire region. Because people need to understand that, a lot of the region depends on tourism, Antigua and Barbuda in particular, flights, visas, all sorts of guest houses and whatnot, right? And when you're looking at the region, the Caribbean, people just speak about the Caribbean flippantly. They're looking at the region as a whole, right? So when you are relying heavily, the majority of the islands, on visitor confidence, especially when you have people from the UK, US, Canada, etc., folks do not want to fly into a conflict zone, particularly when we've just had heard that there were near 2 misses with commercial airlines out of Curacao, right? With, of course, we noted that there's a significant NOTAM over Venezuela, which is where the FAA closes the airspace due to heightened tensions and risk and security and all sorts of things. What happens within that space is that where these airlines are operating from, also, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, they also have relative restrictions. And we have to remember that these military flights are flying all over the region. So we can track them on Flight 24. What impact does that have? Well, because they're hiding their location, because we're in the middle of a warfare, right? Commercial flights often have their GPS signals and so on jammed or affected, and you would have heard, several persons complaining about that, over the last month or so, right? These become a very high risk situation for the region as a whole and people's lives, right? And so tourists, we have to be real. Tourists do not distinguish between safe islands and problem islands, right? They're just looking at the whole picture. This is a regional security scare, and they're going to react to a region-wide headline that in the Caribbean there's a conflict. It started off with bombing boats, right? So people are already concerned about that. potential human rights violations, all sorts of statements. Now we have airspace closing, GPS jamming, all sorts of things that are now escalating. These are now having spillover effects, right? But I want to tell you how, from a Tobago standpoint as well, what effect those are having. In November 2025, the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association reported that Christmas New Year occupancy fell from 76% to 42%, just primarily due to security anxiety, right? And there was a slight recovery, but it's largely not done so well. So think about that if we are to now expand that to the rest of the region. The region has suffered this year from Hurricane Melissa to, Antigua and Barbuda still rebuilding from the devastation that has happened recently. And now we have concerns about regional spillover from this Trinidad and Tobago Venezuela war. So to answer the question, we are inextricably linked, no matter what we say, no matter what we want to feel about ourselves. We need to get off this high horse, because being a regional integrationalist means that we are part of one village. And like I said previously, it takes a village to raise a child, and when some of the children go outside of that village, it affects all of us. And I fear that as a country, Trinidad and Tobago, who are once strong proponents of regional integration, to be pulling the rug from under the very foundations of what we believe. We are that sour point that is unraveling the social fabric of what it means to be together and what it means to stand together and deal with things in a formidable way.
All right, thank you, Pearce. And if you're just joining the conversation, we're speaking with Pearce Robinson. He's a development diplomat and strategic advisor. And also on the line, we have Leroy George. He's a research writer out of Tobago. And we also have Dr. Oswald Thomas on the line, and Troy Manhunt Thomas as well. Leroy. Leroy, I have a question for Leroy. What are your thoughts on the Prime Minister's statement that the Caribbean is not a zone of peace?
I think the Prime Minister, who happens to be a lawyer, is pretending to be less intelligent than she is. When we refer to the Caribbean and Latin American region as a zone of peace, this is a title that has to do mainly with international conflicts and the rules that exist as it pertains to things like you can't have a submarine that is carrying a nuclear weapon in the Caribbean and Latin American region. You can't have that. Sorry about that. I'm getting a little bit of America. That protect the Tobago space and the Trinidad and Tobago space altogether. And for her to make that statement is particularly harmful, because we also hear her making statements that belittle the relationship that Trinidad and Tobago has with CARICOM, whereby she refers to the United States as our biggest trading partner and fails to recognize that CARICOM could be argued as being our biggest trading partner if we draw a line between exploitative trade and symbiotic trade. And so it is very dangerous. And for us here in Tobago, we remember that during the time of the Federation of the West Indies, when all of the English-speaking Caribbean was going forward towards independence as one singular nation, Tobago would have voted for the Democratic Socialist Coalition of political parties, as well as all the smaller islands, I think with the exception of only Antigua, and it was Jamaica and Trinidad that would have voted with the Democratic Capitalist Coalition of political parties. And then when the Democratic Socialist Political Party Coalition would have won the first and only federal election of 1958, it was Trinidad and Jamaica who were the first to pull out and weaken the situation. And so I think that Ms. Kamala Persad-Bissessar's utterings, and if we were to go into all of her utterings, they're extremely dangerous and extremely harmful to the unity that is the Federation of the West Indies, CARICOM, the English-speaking Caribbean. And the last thing I'll say on that matter, I believe in something called naturally occurring nations. And if the nation that I am to be a part of was to be a naturally occurring nation, meaning to say the geography of the situation, the language, the culture, etc., being consistent enough to create a naturally occurring nation, I would think at least the Southern Caribbean is such a thing. And so we should be moving towards that and not away from that.
Yeah, just to add very quickly on to my friend Dr. Leroy's comments. It's very disingenuous on the part of the Prime Minister in terms of the whole zone of peace. CARICOM is not a zone of peace because she knows very well what it means. The zone of peace is a political doctrine that dates back to the 1980s, right? When we were now starting to understand all of the prevailing circumstances that we are very well aware of today, right? We want a region of peace, right? The zone of peace specifically is a doctrine that was designed to keep us out of wars, of a buildup. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? It's to keep us out of those sorts of great power conflict. And I have to step back a bit because there is an instance where we often in the region tend to undermine each other, because we need only go back to 2017 under President Trump's first term, where President Trump wanted to have this sort of antagonistic approach toward Venezuela, and then invited a specific grouping of Caribbean leaders, of which the outgoing chair of CARICOM, Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica, was a member of that contingent that went to Mar-a-Lago, right? And it was all in an effort to try to get them to agree to support a U.S. military buildup against Venezuela. You would recall back then, the wider region, of course, would have, said that no, we are a zone of peace, and these are the things that we want to do, and so on and so forth. And then they worked out the whole Montevideo mechanism to try to curtail that with the support of Mexico, Uruguay, members of the EU, and whatnot, right? And that was a specific legal framework to put things in motion to kind of, as a guardrail to prevent that, and it worked, right? But now, and President Trump's second incarnation in government, he's come again, but this time he's come to Trinidad. The interesting thing about coming to Trinidad is this, and then we don't often talk about it, but Trinidad and Tobago happens to be, at a significant security crossroads, right? Just because of its geopolitical position. Not just that, we are also hosts of CARICOM Impacts, right? Which is all about regional, maritime security, intelligence sharing, and all of that type of stuff. And within that falls the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, which was an initiative that was built out under President Obama's first term. So it's important for us to look at all of these things in context, because it gives us a kind of a view as to where we're sitting. It gives us a view to where we're sitting in this space. So looking at the bigger picture is important.
All right, thank you there, Pearce. Manhunt, I don't know if you have a question for the guest.
Move to Dr. Thomas. I will really want to ask some questions on a different subject matter going down in the conversation as it relates to politics at this present time. So you can move to Dr. Thomas.
All right, Dr. Thomas, are you there?
I am here, Al, and good afternoon to your other guests, Manhunt, and your listeners. And I listened very keenly, and the historic background and relationship, the gentleman so expounds all on point. And I have to say that elections do have consequences. And that is one of the issues that, people tend to forget. And in all of the promises leading up to an election, there are certain backroom deals, and some people believe that this may have been a discussion prior to elections. But what we're seeing is unfortunate because it does have serious implication for the region if this escalates. As you can see, even in Puerto Rico, there has been demonstration by Puerto Ricans of not wanting the military buildup in Puerto Rico. However, as Prime Minister Camela says that she is looking out for Trinidad first, and Trinidad security first, and Trinidad everything first, and whatever, the hell with the rest of the region. And that is a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing for us because it is something that will affect us. It will affect our tourism. It will affect our commerce. It will affect, and we are already a vulnerable space because we are vulnerable to all external shocks, whether it be climate or otherwise. And the world has a financial shock. I mean, we catch a big cold in the Caribbean. So this is a terrible thing. And we hope that dialogue, diplomacy would prevail in getting this thing. And I now heard, I think as of Sunday, that the Trump administration is now saying that they're going to apply economic pressure on Venezuela for Maduro to step down. And so we have to begin to ask, what does that mean? And how does that affect us all in the Caribbean?
Absolutely. And I think to add on to that, it's important to speak this against the reality, right? Now, it is a fact that Trinidad and Tobago does primarily get quite a bit of resources from the United States. They are our largest trading partner, right? In terms of energy related matters, but non-energy related matters, CARICOM is materially beneficial to Trinidad and Tobago, and so much so that our companies and businesses and financial services are so entrenched in the rest of the region through acquisitions and mergers and whatnot, that it is ludicrous for any prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago, understanding how deeply connected we are, to be making comments about how CARICOM is not a reliable partner when we have assets and resources and things that require investor confidence. And this is very, very strange. And as Gaston Brown recently noted, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, that it is in fact a fact that Trinidad and Tobago has earned over US $1.1 billion from CARICOM trade in 2024, right? And just domestic exports alone accounted for 784.7 million, of which 501.3 million is re-exports, right? And since almost the beginning of our trade with CARICOM, we've run the largest trade surplus in the whole thing. So when the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago comes out and says CARICOM is not a reliable partner, they're dysfunctional, they're this, they're that, but then her own Minister of Finance in the December review release of the economy confirms this net positive regional trade balance, but also the document itself says quite categorically in the data that it's presenting that CARICOM is actually a reliable export market alongside the United States. And it's very important that many people don't know how dire our foreign exchange issue is in Trinidad and Tobago. So imagine, many CARICOM states decide that they're going to step away and look for other markets and so on. That's going to be devastating further to Trinidad and Tobago's economy. So I don't really know, what is guiding Mrs. Prasad-Bissess's utterances, but they're not really grounded in the facts and the data, right? And that is what has many people, folks who voted for her, members in the business community, quite alarmed at the conversations and the rhetoric. I mean, just recently, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessa said that her own country is a lawless dump, right? So we are in a very peculiar state in Trinidad and Tobago, and it is going to have, if we're not careful, deleterious effects long term.
All right. Well, Leroy George. Misinformation. I think we're in the era of misinformation. Are folks in Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago by extension, concerned about information that they're getting from their government, from the media, from social media? There are a lot of concerns in Trinidad and Tobago about misinformation.
There is a lot of concerns. To say that there's a lot of concerns as it pertains to misinformation would be a serious understatement. Let me give you an example. I've been to Venezuela on 2 occasions, the second occasion being 2 weeks ago. And I remember when I traveled from Tobago to Trinidad to meet with the rest of the Trinidad and Tobago group of persons going to Venezuela to attend a group of summits, etc. 2 of the individuals, they put it to me that the information in Trinidad was that the people of Tobago was happy about the radar, and that was so untrue. The vast majority of the people in Tobago are very unhappy and very uneasy about this radar. And I like what Dr. Thomas brought up about elections having repercussions and situations happen as a result. It's not a toy, the election process, etc. And into one very optimistic thing that I would say is that in Tobago, we are going to have our Tobago House of Assembly election in less than 2 weeks. And the Tobago House of Assembly election is extremely important to the people of Tobago. We probably hold it in even higher regard than we hold the general elections that happens every 5 years or so. And the number one topic that is being discussed is this whole situation with the radar, the assets, the fact that we're losing income at a very rapid rate where the tourism is concerned. And so, as one person would have said, it is like having this election is like having an opportunity for the people of Tobago to speak on behalf of all of Trinidad and Tobago as to whether or not we accept or reject the actions of the political leader of the UNC, who is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And the reason why that is the case is because there are 2 political parties that are going to, the 2 main political parties being the Red Party, that is the People's National Movement, and we would have the minority leader, who is the equivalent of like the opposition leader, saying that once the People's National Movement comes into power, they would go ahead and make the moves necessary to have that radar removed. And on the other side, you have another political party called the TPP, which is the Tobago People's Party, which has been financed by Kamla Prasad-Bissessa even before she became the Prime Minister of Trinidad, and even before the leader of the TPP, who is Mr. Pali Chavez Agustin, a person who is really renowned for telling untruths, and I could go on for weeks where that is concerned, even before he became the Chief Secretary of the Tobago Space. And so that is one case of misinformation. Another case of misinformation would be when the radar first came into existence, the idea that was put forward that is that it's entirely for detecting drug traffickers. And then there was a situation in Trinidad where in the Caroni swamp, they found over 100 million TT dollars worth in sneaky weed, they call it, or sneaky marijuana, they called it. And the information that we got when the real truth came forward is that the radar was not capable of having found that. It was found in a vessel that had no engine in a dense mangrove forest, and the radar cannot see through the northern mountain range of Trinidad. And so one had to ask themselves, and also when they found this 100 and something million dollars TT in marijuana, nobody was actually caught with the marijuana. And then when the commissioner of police was asked why is that the case, his excuse was that they didn't want to keep police officers looking over the marijuana to see who's going to come to claim it because of mosquitoes, right? And so consistently we are getting misinformation, but consistently the misinformation is so ridiculous in its nature that consistently we are realizing that the information is incorrect, and it's helping us to build our culture right here in Trinidad and Tobago, whereby we start double checking the information that is coming to us from the government and making ourselves more knowledgeable. And so I am optimistic that what is going to happen is that we are going to become more politically conscious and more politically intelligent as a result of this situation. That's one positive thing that is going to come of it. And the last thing I'll say, Mr. Robinson mentioned the hardship to get foreign revenue, specifically US dollars. It's really, really difficult. And when I was in Venezuela 2 weeks ago, what stood out to me is that hardship does not exist in Venezuela. They do almost all of their domestic transactions in US dollars. And I would caution the people of the Caribbean and Latin American region that when you lean on someone else's currency as heavily as we see the Venezuelans leaning on US currency, you may be inviting a situation whereby they think the nation that you're leaning on, where the currency is concerned, that they could exploit you, that they could take advantage of you because they have you in a state of dependency. And so one of the things we need to start looking at is how to diversify our spending as it pertains and our acquisition as it pertains to foreign currencies. I would say China currency is becoming more popular, and perhaps we should consider doing trade both in US and Chinese dollars as much as possible, so that when one nation is treating us in an improper way, we could lean more on the other superpower. We now live in a multipolar world, and we could then become more assertive in the way we do business.
No, I just want to thank you for sharing, Leroy. The only thing that I would say is that I as somebody who is a strong proponent of integration, I think we don't necessarily need to draw too heavily between the superpowers, as it were. We can look only to establishing a currency framework of monetary policy and so on, and that way we can have one monetary policy that can then react to shocks, right? Because we tend to have sort of a fragmented approach, and we think that the only way is to rely on this person and that person, but actually we can deal with a lot of the pressures that we are facing by putting the hard work in, building out the regional systems within CARICOM to fortify the Caribbean single market and economy, which we have been too scared to do because of, I would argue, ego, the ego that has held us back since the days of colonialism, right? But that's just me.
I agree with your statement more than I agree with my own previously made statement. A lot of people, I love that word you use, scared. A lot of people are scared to open their minds to the possibility of doing things in a way different from how it has been done in times past. And that is why even myself, I'm very reluctant to share that exact idea that you put up forward there. If we were to unite ourselves more in terms of currency, perhaps we could even expand our minds to the point which not only does the Caribbean start using a single currency, which is our own currency, but finally we could start printing our own money also, because we have a situation where all the money from Trinidad and Tobago is printed in the Great Britain, and I believe the Eastern currency even has the image of the Queen on it. All these things are so inappropriate. And when we look at how those islands in the Caribbean that are not bowing to Donald Trump at the rate at which Kamala Persad-Bissessar is bowing, how do they look to punish us? Is that they restrict our access to come into their nations. And do you know, if we had free traffic flow or free movement between our islands as different nations, and we were one singular nation perhaps even, we would not feel the need to have to travel to the United States to meet our different ambitions.
Using this adapted position that you've just espoused here, I would even go so further as to use that as an example that actually integration does not weaken our national authority. It strengthens it by doing precisely what you would have mentioned, by preventing the external powers that be from exploiting our division. Because what then happens when we're exploited and we're fragmented is that we are now acting in silos. We're acting individually. And by acting individually, that turns into our states into taking on, we are the price takers on an individual level. We don't have any decision. We can't react. We can't set the policies and frameworks necessary to make the political and social decisions necessary to advance the benefits to our citizens. So collectively speaking, I think this situation that we found ourselves in the region is precisely why we need to be looking even further at strengthening the systems and structures that bring us together more. Because, I tend to think that we are, once superpowers get their business done and they get the things that they have done, they have no time for anybody else. So we can't be sitting here hoping for a handout. We have to build ourselves, build our own structures, build our own networks, right? And understand that we gain strength by coordinating our position, sharing risk, and defending the common interest through regional systems like CARICOM. Because guess what? We're doing that anyway. You know why? Because with this conflict that we are experiencing here, we're sharing the risk. People are looking at us collectively. People are understanding that this is a single operational zone. So the heightened military activity that we're seeing in the Southern Caribbean airspace raises the insurance and operational costs across all the regional routes, including the flight servicing Antigua and Barbuda. That leads to higher, costs, fewer flights, higher fares, and seasonal cutbacks, because people are thinking, okay, well, we're getting a sense of perception. Remember, perception is everything. And in a region where the predominance is tourism, right? We have to understand that perception is everything. And we must do absolutely everything we can. And for Prime Minister, who is in charge of Trinidad and Tobago also relying on tourism, to be making such reckless, incendiary, and further exacerbating remarks, not being measured in her approach. These things further damage not just the rest of the region, but us too, right? So we can't stand alone. Everything that we've discussed today is an example of why we need to go further, look internally, share our commonalities, and strengthen that as a bulwark against the rise of, illiberal approaches that seek to divide and conquer. Because I just want to say before I move on.
Gentlemen.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I have this question that I want to put to
Sure.
any one of you.
Sure.
With this situation right now, with Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar seems to be very much supporting the Trump administration as to what they're doing. Now, let us look at, remember Donald Trump is not going to be president forever. We don't even know if, if he's going to last this full term, or, and if Congress may have some changes and so on and all that. Now, with how would it, what do you think will be Trinidad's situation under a change of government in the United States? What will be Trinidad's position? Because Trump policy and how he's operating is certainly not of the real American people. We can see that, from the different, congressmen we hear speaking and Democrats speaking and this and that. We know that it's not really what the American people really wanted. So what do you think will be Trinidad's position with a new government of the United States who does not align themselves with what Trump has been doing?
I love that question. It's a question that I think about all the time, and I wonder if other people don't think about it. First thing first, a lot of what Donald Trump is doing is legally questionable at best, and at worst is illegal in terms of international law. And if the International Criminal Court was to find his actions illegal and his subordinate or his accomplice, Ms. Kamala Persad-Bissessar's attempts to assist him to also be illegal, the ironic thing is that this International Criminal Court is the brainchild, or was the brainchild, of Mr. A.N.R. Robinson, a former Prime Minister and President of Trinidad and Tobago. She could find herself in hot waters right next to Donald Trump. And as you would have pointed out, the stance that Trump makes is not the stance that the United States has. And the reason we know that is because statistics were had, and there was surveys done, and we know that 70% of the United States does not support what Donald Trump is doing where Venezuela is concerned. So where right now you have a situation where people in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm guessing the rest of the Caribbean, are afraid to speak out against the policies and the acts of Donald Trump, perhaps they may find themselves, because they don't want to be seen as being anti-American and as a result not be able to get visas, etc. Perhaps some of those who are siding with Donald Trump might find themselves, ironically, in a negative position where visa applications are concerned, because they would have expressed opinions, etc., that are not solid in legal footing and that are not actually American. And so a new American administration, when they come into power, may find their statements that are being made now and being considered pro-American now to be anti-American.
Interestingly, I look at it slightly differently, right? Because, in terms of the ICC and so on, it's important to note that the United States is not even party to the International Criminal Court, right? But be that as it may, I would state that whether or not the U.S. government changes, in my view, is not really that relevant, and I'll tell you why. Because that happens regardless. I think what's more, and what drives to the heart of your question is our geography does not change, right? So if our foreign policy is being built around, tarnishing a neutral position that we've had for decades, right? Since our founding with our closest neighbor, and that has been built, around a sort of antagonistic approach. We have done ourselves a disservice, right? Because what comes next after Washington shifts, is whatever foreign policy is at play. But we in Trinidad and Tobago still are closely, situated next to our neighbors, Venezuela. So that then begs the question, what happens? Because we would be left managing a complex neighbor relationship, gotten to the extent where we've gotten to the point of folks even threatening to bomb us, right? So to rile up a relationship to your closest partner, where for we're relying on Venezuela with shared maritime boundaries in terms of energy corporation, the Dragon gas. We have two channels in Trinidad and Tobago between that separate us between Venezuela and Trinidad. It is the Boca del Dragon, the Dragon's Mouth, and the Boca del Serpiente, the Serpent's Mouth, right? And each of those sections of the island has energy resources. And we've often shared our resources with energy corporations with Venezuela. And so moving on, let us hypothetically say after all of this hoorah, there is no war, and they don't change Maduro. Remember, Trinidad and Tobago got a renewed OFAC license from Marco Rubio, having squashed. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm listening. True, that's true.
Having squashed the previous administration's longer term OFAC license for the Dragon gas, the Republicans didn't agree with that. So they squashed that under the Biden administration and renegotiated one that is significantly less. So Mrs. Prasad came into office brandishing a 6 months OFAC license and how he to get the energy that Trinidad and Tobago needs for jobs and create this and that, and how she's going to go to Venezuela and negotiate. And all of her supporters were brandishing her as, the best and the greatest and whatnot, right? Juxtapose that against where we are today. That was just mere months ago. Now we are talking about regime change. Now we're labeling the Venezuelan administration a narco-terrorist and this and that. There's a reason why small and developing islands, and there's a reason why we had this zone of peace in the Caribbean. Because we have a shared space. And because of where our geographical position is in Trinidad and Tobago, right? We control the Southern Caribbean airspace hinge, closest state to Venezuela, and are now hosting in Tobago, as my good friend just said, a U.S. military radar in which in the New York Times exclusively revealed that radar does not have anything to do with ground interdiction. It is for missiles, it is for aerial threats. So what missile are we anticipating on the island of Tobago? And this runs to the very crux of what we are concerned with. So as an island that now controls the Southern Caribbean airspace hinge, right? We're looking into the Southern Caribbean and into the Atlantic and all sorts of things, right? The regional risk is now evenly distributed. We now have a collective security situation that is now under strain. And all of this has been formed out of a unilateral alignment with a position that goes against the very grain of the CARICOM Charter, of which we were founding members. So I just wanted to sort of emphasize that because your question is so integral to the future of Trinidad and Tobago and our management of the economy. And I want to point this out, that prior to this dispensation of this administration coming into power, Nutrien had invested, I think, $150 million in, fortifying its position in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, right? When Mrs. Prasad Bisesa came into office, she went to Nutrien Limited. This is a energy company in Trinidad, and said she wants them to pay X amount of taxes and so on. So Nutrien shut down the place, right? They said, listen, we're not going to facilitate that. We don't like how we're being treated. We've been in the island for about 40 years, right? Doing all sorts of things. We're looking to pack up. And now that caused scandal and chaos in the island because they are contributors to the oxygen cylinders in the hospitals and so on. And we got a glimpse right? Of how much chaos can be caused when something as simple as nutrient shutdown, right? So now they're saying that they're going to shut down for good, and they're now realigning their position and moving on out of Trinidad and Tobago. That is devastating to our economy, because what it means is that 31%, right, of our I lost my 31% of its contribution is taken out from the country, right? GDP. And so that then creates a situation, right, against the backdrop of, 31% of our ammonia is gone, right? And that is a forex earner. That's significant to our energy needs, okay? And then against the backdrop of all of this, right, a significant loss, we now have rent increasing, gas increasing, NIS increasing, priority bus route increasing, all kind of thing increasing that goes against the promises that were made in the manifesto prior to election. So I want the people in the Caribbean to understand that when we are electing leaders and when we are trying to make decisions that have implications for our lives, we have to look at the bigger picture. We are never in this space alone, and the decisions that we make without listening carefully to the utterances that are preceding those decisions, right? You know, it then results in situations that create long-term damage to Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the Caribbean. So this foreign policy shift has not just been gradual; it has been such a shocking thing that we even imposing 100% tariff on certain goods in the region, further exacerbating and undermining the CSMA. So I just needed to sort of bring all of that into one conversation so we understand just how we are walking a very tight rope. And we're very close to being us, Trinidad and Tobago, being a dysfunctional society.
Wow, well, that's dark.
Sorry to say.
Well, pick a side.
In terms of solutions, one thing I tend to refer to is Switzerland. Switzerland practices something called direct democracy, whereby you don't just vote for who gets to represent you, who gets to make decisions, etc., but you even get to vote on the decisions that are being made. Because one thing that I told all my Venezuelan friends once I was over there, and even my other Eastern Caribbean friends, is that they should understand that Kamala Persad-Bissessar never campaigned on an anti-Venezuelan, pro-Trump platform. This is something that she sprung on us after becoming the prime minister. Her main campaign promise was to give the people, the public servants, a 10% salary increase with the back pay that comes as a result of that. And they haven't gotten it up until this moment. And it's so important that people understand that. And the other thing, my good brother there, this is the first time we're doing an interview together. It's such a big pleasure. He would have made mention of Kamala getting an OFAC license. And let there be no ambiguity in the ignobility or in the intent of our Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar, because that OFAC license situation, it exposed her ignobility. And let me explain exactly what I'm talking about. Originally, that drug and gas deal was expected to be a symbiotic one. Venezuela is under sanctions. We are not under sanctions. We sell Venezuelan gas. It's a lifeline to them. It's a lifeline to us because we're in the twilight of our petrochemical industrial years. However, once Kamala got that OFAC license, we heard coming from Marco Rubio's mouth that the new arrangement would be one whereby Maduro's government would not be getting much, if anything at all, out of the arrangement. And so you combine that with Kamala stating that the radar is there for sanction busters, or which could be chance, as I would have explained before, which could be interpreted as to help with the blockade against Venezuela. And we now see that she is seeking to turn, or sought to turn, what was initially a symbiotic relationship into one of extortion. And so we need to have a system whereby no individual person, for whatever reason, could take us down such a morbid road. And if we had gone with what was the original intent for a naturally occurring nation, which is the Federation of the West Indies, it would have been a federal arrangement. And because it would have been a federal arrangement, then no one individual would have had this kind of power, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is exactly what we are looking at right now. We need to see some decentralization where power is concerned, and Caribbean unity helps where that is concerned.
All right,
Look,
a very
Go ahead,
interesting
Frank.
concept. I mean, as we try to wrap this discussion, it's quite stimulating, and it seems as if it could just go on. I've heard in recent times, people are telling each other on social media. You have these social media wars going on. That nations should pick a side. We have established a zone of peace. Is peace still a side? I mean, can we work together as a region? Can different nations work together, respecting borders, respecting values? Is that still a thing?
I mean, absolutely. I think it must be a thing, and we ought to insist that it is still a thing. Because for states like Caribbean states, many small states by extension, we cannot look at this as some kind of thing that is up for debate, because it is not. We don't have the capacity to deal with the fallout of war. We've seen in regions afflicted with war, the regional devastation and implication and insurgencies and so on, that then start to pop up. Right? Things are then being financed, governments are being put in place, and then other elements of financing it to get them out of place, and then we have rising violence and so on. We have not had these things. So choosing peace means choosing stability, economic continuity, and the protection of civilian livelihoods. And that is very important. We need to understand what that means over this notion of alignment with some great power, right? We're supposed to be in a post-colonial period. We're supposed to have done what Bob Marley said, emancipate ourselves from this kind of mentality, right? This idea that small countries, because we don't control anything, we can't win, and we just need to fall down and accept things. No, if we work together as a family, in a unit, history has shown that when powers clash and things like that, small nations are often the ones that are picking up the pieces. Trinidad and Tobago and the region have done assiduously in being part of conversations and so on to reduce tensions. It is the International Criminal Court, that order, which was conceptualized by Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson out of Tobago. And so when we're looking at things like tourism declining, insurance rising, airspace being tightened around us, and people hesitant to invest or come, none of these things are serving the ordinary people of Antigua and Barbuda, of the Cayman Islands, anywhere up and down the region. So choosing peace, in my humble view, does not mean tolerating wrongdoing, right? Does not mean being part and parcel of things that undermine others or abandoning security. It means looking out for the things, managing disputes through diplomacy, which we have been doing. Look at just the other day when the Guyanese and the Venezuelans were up, and I think there was even some incident at the border where some folks died. It was the region that brought Venezuela's Maduro and Guyana's Ali. to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where they signed the Argyll Declaration to reduce tensions and so on. We have a record of doing that, right? And it is Ms. Prasad Bissessa, when she was in as chair of CARICOM in 2013, when the Dominican Republic had stripped the citizenship of over 200,000 Haitians. She disciplined the Dominican Republic and suspended their application for membership of CARICOM, and then accelerated that to the ACS, Association of Caribbean States, and CELAC, because she was so appalled by it. And how did she do that? She invoked the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to say that member states need to abide by the collective decisions of CARICOM and not deviate from that, because these are the principles that hold us and that we've agreed to and that are binding. And so that is why when I wrote that article for 18 Degrees North, I called on Wholeness to invoke the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to call Trinidad and Tobago to order. Because it is there, the mechanisms are there, but often we're too scared to take the necessary steps that are required and that exist to de-escalate the situation, to bring people to the stuff. Because the revised treaty says that anytime there are spillovers, I'm paraphrasing here, it is mandatory for consultation. So I'm just saying, folks, for the Caribbean especially, peace has always been a side. It is the side that keeps planes flying, ships moving, jobs intact, and families secure. Nobody at risk. So the side is peace. And it's not a debate, in my humble view.
All right. Will that be your final word, or do you have any final thoughts?
Look, I think that will be my final word there. Peace is the answer.
Okay, well, it's quite appropriate. Leroy George.
So my final thought on that, on what Mr. Pearce Robinson would have put out there, when Kamla Prasad Bissessa would have first declared that she was siding with Trump over Venezuela and over CARICOM and all of that stuff, she would have used that excuse that she was doing it in defense of Guyana. And I would like to say something. Being a zone of peace and having a spirit of peace doesn't mean that you have to pretend to not realize when somebody is saying something that is false and call them out, even if that somebody represents your own nation. The fact of the matter is, when Kamla Prasad was Prime Minister the first time around, because she was Prime Minister 10 years before now and 15 to 10 years before now, the treatment of Guyanese was not nice at all. Guyanese in the Trinidad and Tobago space as it pertains to immigration. It is only when Guyana became one of the, if not the fastest growing economy in the world, Kamla became all of a sudden pro-Guyanese. And the situation between Venezuela and Guyana as it pertains to the Essequibo region had already been settled during the time of the predecessor of Mr. Maduro, which is the individual Hugo Chavez, whereby they would have agreed to settle that whole Essequibo situation. And as part of the settlement, they will do business with each other as next door neighbors comfortably. However, it was when ExxonMobil, which is the evolution of another company which was called Standard Gas or Standard Oil, one out of the two, which started with Rockefeller, etc. It is when ExxonMobil got involved with Guyana and began to make moves towards Guyana, not having trade with Venezuela, not having a friendly relationship with Venezuela, that situation had been recreated or had risen up again as something that is a problem. And so as we seek to be united, we must also have, and as we seek to be peaceful, we must also realize we also have a responsibility to be brave enough and call out our leaders when they are in the wrong. And I'm so glad that this conversation went in the direction that it did, where we were able to call out our own leader in her wrongs.
All right. Thank you so much, Leroy. Okay, Manhunt, do you have any thing final to say here?
Well, I would just like to say to these two gentlemen that they would have done an excellent job. I was just here, for the education of what is happening, in Trinidad, because I've been following the news in Trinidad, and I've been realizing that Trinidadians are not so much happy. I think that the discussion was quite interesting, and oh boy, maybe this program should be replayed, Al.
Why not?
They have done an excellent job.
I won't be here for the rest
They
of
have
the
done an
year,
excellent.
so yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Thomas, are you still with us? There's usually a delay.
I'm still with you. We're having a wonderful program. We may need a part two.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, certainly.
But I would like to say, Al, the CARICOM as expounded by the gentleman are all correct if you begin to deepen the integration. What we lack is the political will, the citizenry of all of our islands. We are friends, we integrate, we meet, we behave as one. I think where the apprehension comes from, it comes from our political leaders who are afraid to make those steps, again, afraid of giving up part of their power, their kingdom, whatever you want to call it. It is still a bad thing that I carry a passport that says CARICOM passport, but I can be denied entry at any of the islands in CARICOM that I attend for whatever reason. And so maybe we need to start at that kind of regional deepen integration. Maybe CARICOM heads of government, maybe we should begin to try to begin again at a CARICOM parliament and making policies and so forth that are binding on certain states to get certain things done. And then maybe this is the moment, maybe one good thing that could come out of America and what Trump is doing is for CARICOM leaders to sit down and look at how we can come together and put policies, programs, and institutions in place that can bear and ward off these kinds of shocks from external powers.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Thomas, and of course, thanks to all of you for participating in this discussion that is impactful to the region. At least the matters that we're discussing, do impact the region greatly. So thanks again, and I hope to speak with all of you quite soon.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you
for having us.
Happy New Year.
Well,
All right.
Bye.
Bye, yeah. Oh, we have a call. Well, Manhunt and Dr. Thomas, you could stick around for a little while. We do have a call. Caller, are you there?
Good evening, Al.
Hi, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm good. Listening to the program all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Al.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
And it's one thing that jumped out at me there, man, is that we as Caribbeans, we have to know, we have to really, really concern about who we choose to be our leaders, eh?
Mm.
I'm telling you, that really jumped out at me. That one sticker was as one of the guys said there.
Yeah, well,
we have to really know who we choose as leaders, boss.
Mm-hmm. The biggest problem that I see in terms of, as you say, choosing leaders is honesty. I mean,
yeah,
people have to start to tell the truth and,
right.
mean the things they say, have principles and ethics and, a real vision.
Yep.
Things that people can rely on and something that people can measure you by.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I think is completely lacking, and it is destructive, is that we have entered into a sort of politics. It might have been that way all along, I don't know. I haven't been around all the time. right? But it's a politics that is like a sport where people pick teams, and it doesn't matter if the team is going against their best interest, even their self-interest. It's just that you picked a team and you're going to stick with it. And, you see people actually supporting people who are against their own interests simply because, that was the person who they voted for, or that was the person who they supported. Even if the person didn't even run in an election in their hemisphere, once they supported that person, even if it's affecting them negatively, because it is, a politics of, what do they call it? Tribal, pick your team kind of politics. People are not interested in truth and understanding issues and ensuring that, things that are done are working in their interest. That's how it seems to me. And until we overcome that, I think we'll have, a cycle of problems going down.
Yeah, because what the guy said a little while in one of the talks is that the lady in Trinidad, she was a chairman at the time when she tried to bring the Dominican Republic when we treating Haiti kind of way together, and she turned around now and talk about fakery and Arcanism now that she lead the country. Then the crazy man. You have to be careful who you choose, boss. But it's a good program, and I like to hear that.
And she was chairman. Chairman of FACTOM at the time, and she used the articles of CARICOM to Shagaramas to bring it to the Dominican Republic.
No, she's pushing it now. No, she's championing up. She's championing the same stuff. Dominican Republic of that where they're treating Haiti. And now she's championing on it like a elephant on the grass now. To mash up the next door neighbor. Boy, I'm telling you. All right, good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Man Hunt, good evening.
Hey, my brother, how are you doing?
Okay, I think we have a message here from the Prime Minister. I think it has to do with pay public sector workers. Anyway, let's hear what the message is about.
The retroactive payments will commence today and should be completed by tomorrow for all those who are currently in the service. I'm advised that those who have left the service because of resignation or perhaps retirement, those may take an extra day and will be paid on Friday. All established workers, non-established workers, weekly and monthly paid workers, they will be paid the retroactive pay. These are individuals who are covered by the various bargaining agreements. And, we are literally making this payment. I think this will be the final payment for the last negotiating period. And evidently, as we enter into a new period, we will try and keep the payments up to date to avoid any arrears. Or if there's any, it'll be negligible compared to prior years. The retroactive payments will commence today.
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. So we have a caller now. Caller, you there?
Hi. Good afternoon, Al. Good afternoon, Mr. Thomas or Mr. Thomas.
A tongue twister?
Pardon?
A tongue twister there?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm grammatically correct. I think it's Mr. Thomas and a Sego.
I guess so.
Yeah?
I don't know.
I just want to commend you on a very, not only interesting, like what Manhunt said, but a very timely and important conversation, discussion, interview, panel, whatever you call it this afternoon, that serves to edify all of us. I want to agree that program ought to be replayed a few times as we grasp and try to understand issues that we are currently in that cannot get any better immediately but has to be resolved. Some way, somehow, we are almost dealing with like another pandemic because of the unprecedented. I mean, who would have thought we'd have seen a pandemic in our lifetime or wars in the Caribbean, but it is what it is. But I also want to say that I want to agree with Ozzy that what stood out for me was when it was said that we ought to be very careful of who we pick as a leader. And I hear your sentiments, Al, that because they pick a team and they're sticking to it, even if they're driving us to the bottom of the ocean, that we must go there. And all we hear surrounding them is just noise and lies and propaganda and holding on to issues like the Alpha Nero that has already been have already been resolved. And that's it. They're already resolved. I'm trying to tag the Alpha Nero with what the visa issue is, and and we understand, and I am happy that it is coming to the fore that it is really the issue of the oil in Venezuela. Yesterday, or the day before, I listened to two gentlemen. One was Isaac Newton, and the other was Mr. Hutton that Jackie had on her show. And they too had high commendation for our Prime Minister, said that he was shining. And all of these luminaries are speaking to the way our Prime Minister, again, as a champion of the Caribbean, handled the matter, because it is felt that somebody should address it, somebody should speak to it, somebody should lead the charge. And again, we see from humble little Antigua that our Prime Minister has the courage, the intelligence, the language, the passion and the compassion and understanding to deal with these issues. I mean, and these issues are not even issues, like I said, that we expect for us to have to be, juggling with, and they're through no fault of ours, and as was said in the discussion, we're a region, so what hurt I run north. Just want to commend you again, Al, for the smartest show on radio. Happy New Year to you when it comes around. Continue to do the best you can to keep this nation informed and going in the right direction, against all odds, because it's not easy time. It's not even easy to have these kinds of conversations. So I just want to commend you on a brilliant show, to you and your other two co-hosts or your telephone hosts there, and to thank the two gentlemen who helped to, elucidate on this matter for us.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
All right.
Sure. Yes, Al, it was definitely interesting.
Just 1 second. I just wanted to replay.
I'm advised the retroactive payments will commence today and should be completed by tomorrow for all those who are currently in the service. I'm advised that those who have left the service because of resignation or perhaps retirement, those may take an extra day and will be paid on Friday. All established workers, non-established workers, weekly and monthly paid workers, they will be paid a retroactive pay. These are individuals who are covered by the various bargaining agreements. And, we are literally making this payment. I think this will be the final payment for the last negotiating period. And evidently, as we enter into a new period, we will try and keep the payments up to date to avoid any arrears. Or if there's any, it'll be negligible compared to prior years.
All right. So Dr. Thomas, you were making a point there. You can close us off, both of you.
I was saying that I'll be, because of the leadership that we have had on this issue and what has come out subsequently as to the real cause between why we are on the proclamation. I don't think many, if any, Antiguans and Barbudans are terribly upset that there is this partial visa restriction on us, because I mean we have to stand up for something or we'll fall for everything.
Okay, Manhunter, can you just close us off a bit?
Yeah, well, I think that, Antigua and Barbuda has always been at the forefront of, of that global conversation where our Prime Minister is concerned. He's a person who advocates well. He's a person who understands the global issues and speaks very intelligent to these issues. And I think he's well respected in the Caribbean as an excellent regional leader. And, and he knows that. And, and when you have that level of respect, you have to speak for the people. So at most times when Prime Minister Gaston Brown is speaking on the global stage, he understands his responsibility to the region. He does not just speak for Antigua because he understands that, listen, on this global stage, we are stronger together as one unit. Antigua cannot be just representing itself. So when Prime Minister Gaston Brown out there, he speaks for the region because he understands, and that is why that Caribbean unity is so important and is so critical to make our voices stronger. Because as one, we have no voice. But if we can come together as one to consolidate on these many different issues, then we will be a more powerful voice out there. And Prime Minister Gaston Brown has understand that and has really delivered. So whatever we are going through, we are okay. We are okay because, as my good friend Dr. Thomas just said, we have to stand for something or we'll fall for everything. You understand me? So we are okay, and that too shall pass, and 2026 is going to see us in a better place. We are a God-fearing country, so we'll continue to pray to God, and God will continue to guide us and see us through. So everyone, have a happy 2026, because I'm sure you're not going to be hearing from me again on Pointe FM until next year. So happy 2026 to everyone.
All right. Thank you, Manhunt, and thank you, Dr. Thomas.
You're welcome. Happy New Year.
Yes, and also thank you to, our other two guests who would have left, somewhere around the 5 o'clock hour. Pearce Robinson, development diplomat and strategic advisor, as well as Leroy George, research writer. So until next year.